Afsana Begum is the MP for Poplar and Limehouse. She was elected as a Labour MP but had the whip suspended by the party for 6 months for voting against the government on the two-child benefit cap. And she joins us. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And how are you going to vote this afternoon?
Well, I will be voting against the government's plans to means test winter fuel payments because I refuse to accept that fuel and pensioner poverty should be a normal part of our society, and that the 5 out of 6 pensioners who live below the poverty line that will lose the winter fuel payments should be considered the people who have the broadest shoulders to fill the £22 billion black hole that has been identified by the government.
Have you been told what will happen to you as a result? Because you obviously had a sort of 6-month suspension from the party from the last vote when you voted against. What have they said will happen to you now?
Well, I haven't been told what will happen next, but I will always do what I believe is right, and I will always speak truth to power and stand up for the people of my constituency in Poplar and Limehouse. And I have been contacted by large numbers of constituents, very personalised correspondence, by people who will be impacted by the means test on the winter fuel payment.
Is this the best way of making change? I mean, you mentioned 5 out of 6 will be affected. There's 10 million pensioners, a million on pension credit. There are another million, it's suggested, who could do with more support. And there may be ways to secure that by working with the government for change rather than at the outset voting against it.
Well, I spent a lot of my time in my first term of Parliament scrutinising legislation by the then government, particularly in the era actually of the impact of policies on people with protected characteristics, the disabled, for example. And I find myself asking the same questions of this government that I asked of the previous government. For example, where is the equalities impact assessment? How many people will be impacted by this policy? How many more people will be pushed into fuel poverty? And what is the plan to protect the most vulnerable this winter? I recognise that we are seeing a situation where the energy bills are going to be going up by an average of 10% from October onwards. I recognise that the full new state pension is set to rise next year due to the triple lock, but that starts next April. So what's going to happen now for the pensioners who are already living below the poverty line? And the
argument put forward by the government is that it is a necessary step because of the finances they've inherited. This is the argument they use. They talk about a black hole and the suggestion that actually they need to do this and they will need to do more. But it's we haven't seen yet what's happening in the budget. There may be some concessions then.
Well, we have had years of austerity, and after years of austerity, there are widespread concerns regarding funding that is needed. But I think we have to understand that we are in a relatively wealthy country. The resources are there in some form. The UK is the 6th largest economy in the world. London is the 5th wealthiest city in the world. It is a question of priorities, political choices, and in whose interest decisions are made.
How many other of your, I was going to say your fellow Labour MPs, but obviously you're not in the party at the moment. Do you know how many Labour MPs feel like you? How many are going to vote against? How many are going to abstain? What's your thought on that?
I couldn't give you the numbers, and I can only speak for myself.
Indeed, but you must have had conversations with people. Do you know if others feel the same as you?
Of course, there are others that feel the same as me, and people who challenge this political myth that poverty and austerity are inevitable. The politics of scarcity. Austerity is a political choice. And if there is no money for our children to live free from poverty, for our older people to enjoy their later years without hardship, then the money must be found. And there are ways and there are options in which the money can be found. For example, by ensuring big businesses and the wealthy can pay their fair share. We shouldn't be looking at the 1.6 million pensioners who are already in poverty.
Afsana Begum, thank you very much.